You're listening to the SojuTalk Nation podcast, episode 41. On today's episode, Koro joins the show to discuss the 2021 SojuTalk Kpop Awards. And this is the after show. So we're a little drunk, we're a little messy, but the party's still going. So sit back and chill with friends. You're listening to the after show with the SojuTalk Nation. Welcome to the SojuTalk Nation podcast, a chill discussion on this week in the SojuTalk Nation. We're recording on Monday, January 3rd, 2022. I'm your host, Crispy, and joining me this week is the anime master, a Koro Sensei. Koro, welcome to the show, sir.
Guess who's back? It's me. I'm back. Well, actually not back. This is my first time on the SojuTalk Nation podcast, but back in the atmosphere. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, man. No, you have done an excellent job with all of your anime takes and reviews, whether it's on the server, whether that's on Soju Sessions, whether that's on the Nerdverse Adventures. That's another show we do. But I have you on now for the recap, the after show of 2021 SojuTalk Kpop Awards. A lot happened in that episode, about a 2-hour show. It was nice to have the crew reflect on music from the past year, as well as talk about their predictions and even reflect on their past predictions. So let's get right into it. Let's get into the awards, how it all went down, and kind of how the crew arrived at a lot of their conclusions for the year. First up, we've got awards. We got Rookie of the Year, male, Incendiary Heroes, female, IVE. All right, Cora, let me throw it to you. What did you think about IVE being female Rookie of the Year?
IVE is it's fair. Like, there's really, I can't argue against them, to be fair to them. Like, I wouldn't have given them Rookie of the Year personally, but I know that's more of my enjoyment of certain songs versus others coming into play, which is, I guess, criteria. That's fair criteria. But really, if you look at, I know they said maybe not numbers is like what they're going on necessarily, but if you look at numbers, it's really not comparable for most rookie girl groups this year. And a lot of people enjoyed the song, and obviously they're gonna have big impact off the bat with like the IZ*ONE members in there. So it was a solid package come out, and from a decently sized company. I think it's fair enough.
Yeah, they did mention that they weren't strictly going off of numbers, record sales, music show wins, but it did heavily influence some of the decisions and some of the choices, right? Which I think is absolutely fair. Even though IVE did just come out a month ago, it doesn't feel like they've had a long run. But relative to the success of other groups within the numbers, and also just everything building up to it, like you said, the IZ*ONE members, I think it's a good place to put them. Me personally, I have Purple Kiss and Billy as music that I've listened to more throughout the year, obviously because they came out earlier, obviously because they've had a few more releases, but I think that's probably the reason why I lean towards those groups a bit more, is just because I've had more time with them. Again, not to say that IVE won't flip into something kind of amazing, because they did mention it feels like a complete group at this point. Going back to watch the music video, those girls are good. So I do have to give the crew credit for at least pointing that out and making that be the main talking point as to why the group is the rookie girl group of the year for females.
And quickly, I also agree in terms of like the group I would have said personally is Purple Kiss. I don't know, like I don't really pay attention to the numbers that much, so I'm not sure like what they've sold or whatever. But in terms of, so they had a solid debut too, but in terms of like a single release that I enjoyed the most out of all like the eligible groups, Zombie was like far and away my favorite out of all of those. So they just get the edge there from me with that.
Yeah, shout out to Delmonic, a big RBW fan,
Yeah.
Mamamoo fan. He's turned me on to Purple Kiss quite a lot this year. I liked Ponzona, didn't love it. And then Zombie with the Disco Retro right at the time of fall. So you have it during Halloween. Just like a perfect seasonal song. Kind of weird to think about that way. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed Purple Kiss as well. Big shout out to Lightsome. I know they're from Cube, so a bigger company, a slower start, but I think they have all the resources to do well and hopefully do something a little bit different from their predecessors, G-Idol. And also shout out to Pixie and Tribe, smaller groups. Delmonic loves Tribe. I kind of love Tribe too. They're kind of a hot mess of a party anthem-y type of music, but it all works for me. Let's move on quickly just to the male rookie group of the year, Incendiary Heroes. I went back and watched Happy Death Day. It's a punk rock, really different. It's super angsty. Relative to the other groups that they mentioned, Mirai and Kingdom, I did see a lot of buzz for those two groups throughout the year, but I think musically and the direction of which their opinions leaned on this year, it does make sense that Incendiary Heroes is for them the rookie boy group of the year. Question for you. So with the way that TXT kind of popped off with that sound, was it a surprise for you that the crew also considered Incendiary Heroes as a top group, or at least the boy group rookie of the year?
I didn't really think of them together, but I guess it does make sense now, considering that TXT is popularizing that sound. And I guess they're also from JYP, so I guess that helps in terms of promotion perspective. And I think it was also quite recent. And I think with a year of, for me personally, with a year of like boy group rookies that felt it didn't stand out that much. Like obviously, not saying any of these songs are like terrible, but just for me, like I have a hard time recalling a lot of boy group rookies that might have come out this year compared to the girl group side, and that might just be bias in general. But I think the fact that it was more recent, it is polarizing as well. Like I personally wasn't a big fan of it, but so I know a lot of people were, and it's like no matter what, you're gonna take a stance on this song because it's so out there, both musically and music video wise. I can get why this would stand out when they're going through what came out this year. Like this was fresh in the mind as well.
Warren has said something really interesting about songs that are polarizing in the past, where if you are a song that takes a big risk and you stick out, that's very memorable. It is better for your future projections than if you're kind of just a boring, bland song that everyone mildly likes. And I do feel like something like Incendiary Heroes falls in that category where, me personally, I thought I was going to really like it initially, and then they do some very strange things in the song. Not going into too much detail about the song. Please check it out. Watch the music video if you haven't seen it. But it really catches you off guard. But I also feel like this is a nice time for them to come out because feels like we're going in this direction where we're going to have different takes on pop punk and the band sound. Whether you are a band, it's a Near Heroes, or you're an established group, and that's a new direction, new genre that is going to be explored. We'll talk about that more a little bit later on in the show. All right, let's move on now to Best Solo Artist Male. The winner this year is Key. He released Bad Love earlier this year. At first, so I caught onto this bandwagon late. I did not watch the music video until fairly recently, but I did listen to the song a number of times. I threw it onto a playlist of very similar disco retro sounding songs this year. I thought it fit great. Going back, I kind of agree. I kind of really like this song. What did you think about how the crew discussed Key and kind of what it meant for SHINee to come back this year?
Yeah, I think it, like, once again, even if I necessarily wouldn't have made this exact choice, it's like you can't really argue against it either. SHINee came back with a bang, like for real. They came back with a bang, and like another like male solo candidate that I would have had up there and probably at the top, maybe with Baekhyun. But Taeyeon also shiny. Obviously, he went to the military this year, but they really had a great year for obviously long-time veterans coming back and really showing that they're here to stay. And he really didn't skip a beat. He just came back with a. It's kind of on that whole weekend trend that has been going on. And honestly, this is one of the songs that sound closest to a weekend song, in my opinion. Like out of like all these songs that are taking inspiration. So I think he did the best K-pop interpretation of that sound, maybe. And a great music video as well. And he's been everywhere, like they said on the show, like in terms of variety and things like that. Like he's just making sure people remember the name if they didn't already. Obviously, he's already a legend, but yeah, he's very relevant again.
Yeah, I think that it's a really important point, right? Where we are looking at the artist in totality. So yes, the song is really good. Unfortunately, it wasn't covered on the main show, but Doug even talks about that. It's like that was a big oof on their part. And then what the artist has done throughout the year as far as coming back to the consciousness of Korean entertainment and Korean culture and the general audience. And I think that is also a really important facet to consider with the best artist, right? It's what this artist has done for the Korean entertainment sphere in total. Speaking of artists that have permeated every single corner of consciousness within Korea, outside Korea, if you're just adjacent to Korean entertainment, you kind of know who this person is. If you watch Korean dramas, if you watch Netflix, this person is on there, at least on my front page with Hotel de Luna and My Mister. We've got Best Female Soloist of the Year. The winner is IU, of course. Some contenders, we had Somi, Chungha, and Taeyeon. Koro, what do you think about IU taking the win here? But also with kind of the strength of the female soloist, there's a strong case to be made for other competitors to hopefully break through next year. But man, IU's just chugging along. What did you think about the results?
Yeah, for the female soloists, what's the word? Category? I don't know. Super strong. And honestly, I think this year could have been, well, it still might have been, but like the year Chungha broke through in terms of being the top, or at least for a year. But IU had to come back and do her whole 30s, like kind of encapsulating an entire era thing, which was realistically like there's no other answer here for a female soloist of the year. Because not only is she obviously IU, what she does, she's the peak in terms of what K-pop might be, especially in terms of female solos. But she also just had a lot of work rate this year. So it's not just living off the name, which like would have been easy to do because obviously it's IU. She could have just dropped one single and still probably been at least top 2 or 3 here in contention. But she had obviously a full EP, or not full EP, a full length album, and then also the recent EP, and she's just been everywhere. Maybe some features too, I think she might have done. Like she's just been doing a lot. So really there's no other choice. But yeah, Chungha, I think she got a bit deflated unfortunately by the pandemic and her whole pre-release build-up thing that lasted like over a year, I feel like. But she also had a great full-length album. I'm excited to see what she does next because it seems like she might be going in a slightly different direction. So I'm curious about that. But also someone I wanted to point out that wasn't mentioned, and also Taeyeon, obviously, the Weeknd's a banger, but was I think she doesn't really count because it's not K-pop proper. But considering we talk about her a bit, BB, it's kind of adjacent, so I understand why it's not brought up. But she had an amazing year in terms of talking about work rate. Like I just went through and saw like "Eat My Love," "Life Is a Bib" with the "Bad Sad and Mad" title track. You got YY, Pato, The Weeknd, which is taking off, and then "Never Gonna Come Down." She's on the Marvel soundtrack with Shang-Chi, like, and then she featured on the Hyoyeon track and then the Soyeon track. Like she's been doing a lot too, and she's definitely. In terms of like who might break through next year, especially, or this year now, especially, I think BB's definitely up there.
All right, I gotta start with BB. I didn't have that as a note because my brain just thinking K-pop proper, and you nailed it. I freaking so if you don't know, I love BB. Man, her music is wild. I saw her live at 88 Rising's Head in the Clouds, and that was a religious experience. It just seeing her, be herself on stage, but in front of a U.S. audience, kind of just amazing, and how well she was received. But everything you said about the number of songs she released, the number of features, projects, collaborations, really sets her up as just an amazing Korean entertainer. I do feel like she does fall into the R&B sphere a little bit more, so perhaps not K-pop proper, but some songs got a little bit of K-pop feel to them. I know Pado definitely falls into the more city rock disco-y, city pop disco-y type of sound. But yeah, I think that's a really good call on your part. For me, I would have thrown in Lehigh. She did promote Red Lipstick similarly to a K-pop promotion cycle, but the entire album, you got a full-length album coming back for the first time in years, and it's just this beautiful piece of artwork. I did a whole review with K Music Every Day, so check it out if you haven't. Talking a little bit more about IU, I do feel like she's a great encapsulation of past, present, and future K-pop. Right, where she brings in a lot of the inspiration of her original sound, a little bit showy, a little bit of the show tunes type of feel, but then with her present, celebrating the fact that she is now 30, and what that means to her, but also being very much in the trend, into kind of the future aspect of music, with doing songs like Lilac and Coin, and then her collaboration with Akmu. Akman's just always doing very forward-thinking things. So it's just it does work, and it makes a lot of sense that she would win this award. It's I love IU so much, so it's great. So yeah, here we are. All right, underrated sleeper songs of the year. We're just gonna quickly go through the cruise choices. So we have Doug with CIX and Cinema, Anita, Irrelevant Answer by Lucy, and Chungha, Warren with 2, X by Chungha, and Beam Beam by Soyeon. Koro, what did you think about these selections, and were there any of these songs that really stood out to you as far as your favorites?
Admittedly, I don't think I've heard the Lucy song, so I will go check that out at some point, because I know there's a large Lucy contingent, or maybe small, but there's a Lucy contingent there on the server that I don't want to upset. But the Cinema song, weirdly, I don't know when that came out, but for some reason that felt like it came out 2019. I don't know. I feel like there may be some other song with a similar name, but that song is catchy enough. Didn't do anything crazy for me, but I see why Doug would put it here. But then with the Warren songs, X, I think is a great choice here, specifically because of type of song it is. Like, it's not a song that would get a lot of traction in terms of like main K-pop talk, just because like it's a more mellow track. But for Chungha's career, I think it really was a great addition to her discography, and it is a great song. It's not a song I go to a lot because of, like, I'm not really a mellow song kind of person, but I can't deny the quality of the song and also the lyrics that Warren likes to talk about a lot as well. And then Beam Beam wasn't my favorite track on that EP. That would be the one with BB and Youngji, but it's a solid song too. So I get why you put that there, and I'm excited to see what Soyeon does in the future, because talking about potential, she's already realizing a lot of it. But talking about potential, just overall package and having control of the entire thing, she really is a special talent. So I'm curious to see what she does in the future.
Yeah, I like to echo your thoughts on Cinema, CIX. I did go back to watch the music video. That is just a very prototypical, fun, light K-pop song and presentation. I just get all the very like positive K-pop vibes with that song. Just watching kind of the way that vintage aesthetic has been used throughout the year in different places. This one kind of works with the camera reels and the old cinema complexes. Irrelevant Answer with Lucy. I did check it out. very anime vibes. Very much up your alley. Yeah, it's super like anime intro, coming of age, a slice of life. So I think Lucy I think is typically known for that sound, but this song in particular definitely hits that. Warren with X, that's his like favorite song of the year. There's a lot of layers to that song that I think make it a very quality song, and because it's Chungha, we would expect it to get a little bit more visibility. But I also do feel like that song might be a little bit, I don't want to say like elevated, because that makes it sound like I think other songs are below it. But I think it's a little too high level for the vast majority of audiences. I'm speaking in generalities, but I think if you're a music lover and a person who really sits down and dissects music, this is the song for you. But if you're a person who, like me, like a lot of people, are very casual, it's a good song, but it's not a song that you would spend hours of trying to figure out the emotional connections, sort of, right? Unless like you love music, like the way Warren does. And then quickly with Soyeon, I love that entire album. Like you said, I think I love the BB and Youngji song at the very end. Is this bad bitch number? Excellent freaking title, excellent song, excellent performance video, by the way. And I think, like you said, Soyeon is just tapping into her soloist potential. She's got a lot to say. She's been the creative head of so many songs from G-Idol for, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years now. Very low key too, in a lot of ways. And it does feel like this is a jumping off point. Hopefully we get more Soyeon, individual expressions similar to this. My underrated song of the year, I mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention too. So Lee Hi is my favorite artist in K-pop, in Korean entertainment, in K-R&B. I mentioned Red Lipstick, an excellent stage performance song that she promoted on music shows. The other song that I absolutely loved was Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes, featuring Weinstein. It's an amazing music video. It's a playful interpretation of young love, and figuring out what it all means to be in someone's presence. The title is HS, Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes. HSKT. But yes, it's amazing. Koro, what is your underrated sleeper song of the year?
Okay, I wrote down a couple because I figured it's funny. I figured you would say Red Lipstick, because that was also one of mine. So good thing you said everything that needed to be said. It was amazing, and unfortunately didn't get covered either because of, we got to blame the Gochu gang there. But yeah, that was a great song. But my probably the most underrated song out of the ones I have is with Eeny Meeny. A lot of people don't remember this song. I kind of hinted at this being my sleeper song of the year when SM had their concert a few days ago, and he didn't perform it, unfortunately. But it's not the type of song I think I'd usually like. It has an instrumental chorus with like some kind of brass sounding effects and stuff, and something about it is just super catchy. And his vocals throughout the verse and pre-chorus are great. And the music video has Seulgi in it, which always gonna do something for me. And I just found myself watching a lot of the performances. The choreo's great. It's just, I didn't expect to like it. I also got to it a bit late as well. Like I found it maybe around April or something. I think it came out in January, so I was just doing a lot of catch up, and I was like, this is great. But I do want to say that this technically doesn't count because it came out on New Year's Eve. But I decided I want to throw it in there. The Rain, JYP, a duet song, Switch to Me. When that came out, literally I said in the Discord, I can't remember the quote, but something like, no song's going to top this all year. Like, this is going to be song of the year. No way anything's going to come close to this. Obviously, it didn't hold up to that extent, but it's still a top 10 song of the year for me. In terms of just like old school duet, and this one between two men, like has that 90s sound that you love to hear. Both men sang and rapped, and also music video of the year candidate in my opinion, and also had the Psy cameo. It was just a great package, and it was a great way to start the year in my opinion. I just had to mention that, even though it was New Year's Eve, technically maybe didn't count, but definitely up there for me. And one more just real quick because it just came out, so I don't know how underrated it's going to be yet. But I haven't seen many people talking about it, including me. Because I'm waiting to see how it gets covered. But the Bam Bam song that just released with Solgi, wow, I was not expecting that. I like this other song, Ribbon, that came out earlier in the year too. That was solid, but this song, it's not overproduced, it's not oversung, it's not over anything. The choreo is great, the music video is solid. Just like, and also talking about duets, like, and how often we get duets between two such big names in the industry, between like big boy group, girl. Obviously, he's not in the group. That's the whole thing, but still, like the name between things like that. Like we don't usually see companies do that. So now that he is doing his solo thing, we get to see something like that, which is cool. And I'm glad SM allowed that to happen. It was just amazing. And I hope a lot of people check that out because it's really, it's a subdued song, which I think has the potential of people to think it might be boring, but it's amazing to me.
Yeah, no, I want to kind of go back into this idea of collaborations that I do feel like it's slept on. I think that is probably like one of the ultimate like sleeper ideas because we don't get it very often. I do feel like we got it a lot more maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but with the way things have changed as far as companies, music companies being big companies, they did mention that in the show. We'll touch on that a little bit later. The fact that they're kind of moving in a direction of behaving like a company, a corporation, where the brand is very important to them. Some of these collaborations get lost in the sauce, and I'm just really happy that we're getting some of them. The JYP Rain one, amazing, excellent. But Bam Bam and Solgi, yeah, there's just something about it. We'll touch on that when we get a chance in the new year, because I do feel like that's going to be a song that sticks for 2022. All right, let's move on now to boy group excellence. So these are the top 3 boy groups the crew has selected for the year of 2021. We've got BTS, TXT, and NCT. Koro, what did you think about the crew landing on these 3 groups, and how did you feel about the accolades and the things that they were discussing on the show?
Yeah, this is like, I'm going to say this a lot because obviously the crew is very knowledgeable with their K-pop. Obviously, I get a lot of my knowledge from them. But even if I necessarily, I said this before, didn't agree, I 100% get where they're coming from, and you can't really argue with these 3 groups. I could see the 17 argument too. It's tough because 17's like, also if you want to consider numbers, like they're probably number 2 maybe. So that's tough, but. Yeah, BTS. I don't know what else needs to be said. I mean, they're just doing it. They're doing it all. They're flying high, and they continue to take the industry in places it hasn't been before. So this 100% makes sense. TXT, even if I was a fan of their 2020 stuff compared to their 2021 stuff, I can't deny that this direction has been successful for them. Because a lot of groups don't really find a direction, and that could be like their downfall. But whether or not like it's for me or not, that's irrelevant. They have found something that works, and it's a very clear direction. I'm curious to see if they continue with that in this year or if they switch it up again. But they really took off in a different kind of way this year, so makes sense. And then NCT is tough because NCT is like, if you consider NCT as a whole, it's just like, it's kind of OP. Like you can't really deny them because there's just so much that they can do with the amount of members and the different units and stuff. If you consider NCT as a whole, like you got to put them up there. And obviously they're going to sell a lot every single time. But if I had to pick a specific unit, I would go with Dream. But I'd still say they're up there on their own. I think Dream kind of, in my opinion, kind of carried the NCT brand this year. So I wanted to shout out Dream specifically, but NCT, yeah, it makes sense. And I have another group I want to say later, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, no. Everything you said about all the groups mentioned here was excellent. I think agree. BTS, what more is there to say? They did everything this year as far as being mainstream accessible. It's kind of strange to think that going from Western accessible to mainstream accessible are two different things, but the way the crew described it really shed light on how BTS is changing as far as a brand, as far as a music entity, as far as artists, right? And there are people who are going to have their gripes about BTS not singing Korean songs this year. Honestly, if it gives exposure to K-pop, I think we're all better for it. I've come to terms with it, and I'm pretty happy about it, because now normal, regular people in public are talking about BTS, who I never thought would ever experience K-pop. And that's all good for me, because that hopefully means more K-pop coming into Western spheres, places that are accessible to me. With TXT, I think you nailed it. As far as finding a direction, their music was nice and enjoyable up until that point. I think very much in line with a lot of other K-pop boy groups. But the fact that they separated themselves so far ahead of everyone else with this sound, and like the crew said, this is probably going to be a trend in a lot of ways for not just boy groups, but girl groups too. And setting that trend for the entirety of 2021, I think speaks volumes to, their strength as a group. And then NCT, a lot of members, a lot of subunits, a lot of songs. So I think for me, I will celebrate the variety in music and the fact that they experimented the heck out of so many different sounds, like a vampire, hot sauce. All right, sticker. All right, but Hello Future. Wow, I really enjoyed that song. I typically don't rewatch music videos of boy groups or listen to songs again from boy groups, or just like have a rotation of boy group songs. Hello Future definitely is on a playlist that has gotten some extra run for me. So big shout out to them. And I do think the way that Warren described the motifs and sounds really shed light on how the music was incorporated throughout all of NCT's projects or units. And I think that's the strength of the crew, where you and I are less inclined to boy groups and male artists, but the way they talk about it, the way they cover it with such depth, at least makes me interested. At least helps me notice all the little details that I would otherwise miss. So big shout out to the crew for getting us girl group stands to pay attention to boy group and male artist. Koro, you had a boy group that you wanted to talk about. Who is it? Who is this mystery group?
Just real quick. Actually, no, it's two. One isn't really a big mystery. EXO, I just wanted to shout them out because obviously you couldn't really give this to them because they're in their military phase right now, and there's only so much they're doing. And with no promotion, though, they just casually sold another 1 million albums, which is just ridiculous.
Casually.
Just casually. No promotion. Half the members there. Oh, let's just sell 1 million albums real quick. It's just what EXO does, I guess. So I just had to give them a quick shout out, and I just can't wait for them to be back in full force. But the mystery group, and I know Biff really likes this too. So Luna, not Luna, ONEUS, who had the tracks Black Mirror and Luna. In terms of like, if we're not talking numbers, anything like that, just in terms of pure song enjoyment. In terms of two title tracks from any boy group this year, they are probably my favorite, and I was kind of sleeping on them myself for most of the year. So this is kind of like my dark horse boy group excellency pick. ONEUS surprised me, and I really enjoyed their music this year.
Nice, man. Yeah. Big shout out to EXO and ONEUS. Check them out. I think the crew did mention that the majority of music was a little bit less than 2020, but there are still gems here and there, and I think it just takes a little bit more work to get to it. But once you find them, hang on to them, and then do what Koro does and shares it with everyone, and really rides or dies with a lot of these songs. We appreciate you doing the work, Koro. EXO, ONEUS, check it out, everyone. All right, let's move on to girl group excellence. We've got 3 that the crew has selected. I've got aespa, TWICE, and Stacy Girls. It's going down. Well, let me just throw it to you without any prompting. What did you think? How'd you feel? And how do you feel like they arrived at these 3 groups?
Once again, this one I think actually is arguable. Obviously everything's arguable, but for the most part, I'm pretty much in line with them. But aespa, obviously, that one's not arguable. Twice is not arguable in my opinion. Like those two, really, it's like 2-horse race for girl groups in my opinion, in terms of like top of the industry doing like the most forward work for the industry on like the girl group level, and in different ways as well. So that's very interesting. So it's really like pick your poison with those two. So I understand how how the crew got there with those. But Stacey, in terms of, I personally think Stacey is like maybe most improved. Well, it's hard to say because it's like their first full year. So really, this is just what they are. They're just great to begin with. But uh, the real most improved, in my opinion, is Brave Girls. And then, so really, I think that the third group comes down to Stacey and Brave Girls. If you want like a real answer, it's one of those two. And I understand why they chose Stacey over Brave Girls, because it seems like if we want to project forward, Stacey's foundation that they built this year seems like more of a thing to stand on than like the sudden virality of Brave Girls. So I understand why they would go there, but I think personally, although I do agree with what they said with like if you're voting for Brave Girls, it feels like you're voting for Roland specifically. But I think they did enough with Team Up Bottom and After We Ride to, even though I think those two songs are kind of just like Roland and We Ride Part 2, but it feels like they did enough to maintain that relevancy, and that's not an easy thing to do. I think it could have been easy for it to be just Roland, and then never see him again. But they were everywhere. They were in everyone's faces, and it was great. Everyone loved it. Yeah, you couldn't find a single person who wasn't excited for them to have this kind of breakthrough moment. And they kept it enough throughout the year, I think, to earn that third spot. I think moving forward, though, that's where you're going to see it's going to be more Stacey than Brave Girls. But I think for 2021 specifically, I can see the Brave Girls argument a bit more than I think the crew did.
Yeah. Talking more about Brave Girls, amazing moment in time as far as being a cultural impact across generations, across demographics, all off of a YouTube edit of Brave Girls' performances to the military. If you haven't seen it, well, where have you been? It's amazing. It's so simple, right? That just a YouTube video could help push these girls, this group, back into the spotlight. With a really good song, by the way. It's an older song, but I mean it's popular now. But I do feel like the crew did make a great point of, yes, the popularity of Brave Girls this year is because of an old song. It's still a great song. But if we're looking at K-pop as far as trends in the present and then looking forward into the future and how does that project, Stacey does make a strong case for being a top girl group of the year. And I personally love Stacey, but I also wouldn't have been mad if Brave Girls got into the top 3 this year, just because of what they meant for the Korean audience and the Korean consciousness. And also just, like you said, the virality of what the internet can do. Yes, Stacey and aespa in a lot of ways are doing things in the internet that are very modern, they're very future forward, but how a song becomes viral and then essentially resurrects a career of 4 performers into entertainment, I don't know how that is possible ever prior to this point in time. So amazing work by all the groups. So yes, a very nice shout out to Brave Girls. Quickly with aespa, I do love the fact that they are trying so many different things at SM. Yes, it's kind of a meme, Kwangya, but it works. Somehow it works because I think the girls are a little bit self-aware about all of the metaverse-ness of it all. So then when they are in public or when they have to present themselves on variety shows or the Macy's Day, Thanksgiving Day parade, there's a genuine feeling of excitement to just be performers and out there, doing this music and doing this insane concept. With Twice, I think we'll probably go into it a little bit more, but I do feel like they this year tried something with alcohol free. It also, I want to talk about alcohol for a second, because initially the crew mentioned that it wasn't doing well, during its initial run, but over time because we like to look at longevity of a song and a group. I think just the Twice brand and the characterization and the fact that people love Twice gave them great numbers at the end, which ultimately is kind of where you want to be as far as a group with staying power. And then it went right into the fields and it went into Scientist. And it kind of goes to show that if you try something a little bit different, but you know how to bring it back and you know how to do it really well, your following will sustain. I think Twice also moving into kind of the start of their Western market US push is exciting. It does feel like they've been trying to do this for a number of years now, at least 2 years, with a couple of the English versions of their past songs. But it now feels like they might be able to break through, which is super interesting because I think the argument is valid that Blackpink is the badass cool girls that is very universally relatable across cultures, across different perspectives. Whereas kind of the cutesy K-pop, cute wholesome K-pop is still a little foreign, a little new, a little different for a lot of people. But I think we're ready. I think we're ready to kind of accept like different versions of what K-pop is going to look like. At least me personally, and I hope that is something that catches on in the U.S. Stacey Girls, it's going down. What more can we say? I kind of love them in a lot of ways for the way that they use TikTok, but the music. I think ASAP and Stereotype are in my top 10, top 16 of the year. And I just for some reason I cling on to this type of sound. The best way I can describe it is that it's a 2000s retro. It's very weird to say, but it's that 2000s R&B type of sound where it's like, okay, this is it with a K-pop twist. All right. We talked a lot about girl groups.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
1 second though.
Can you tell?
I'm not done.
Loved about girl groups. Koro, what else you got for me?
Yeah, I could always go on about girl groups, but no, this is gonna be quick. But just in terms of another dark horse, like my wellness pick, it's gonna sound like I'm extremely biased, and I am. So, Dreamcatcher. I mean, talking about quality, not talking about. We could talk numbers too, because honestly, in terms of like an underdog story, like Doug saying with Stacey, for them to come from the company they're from, for them to have their sound, their concept in a market that doesn't seem super receptive to it in general. Still no music show wins, nothing like that. Like they sold 100K on both of their albums, I think. So yeah, we could talk numbers too, I guess, but just in terms of quality, they're the only group with 2 songs in my top 10 songs of the year, and great albums for both of those songs as well. I just think in terms of just talking quality, no, nothing else. Dreamcatcher, it's so left field, it feels like all the time, because they're just in such a different lane from everyone else, so it's hard to really compare. But in terms of like who in the industry is dominating their lane so much that like it seems like no one else really even wants to step into it, Dreamcatcher stands alone, I think, in that. Maybe we'll see more with like the TXT trend thing slightly getting people into like the rock sphere, so we'll see. But if you see like Dreamcatcher perform anything, they can cover any other group's song, but you don't see a lot of groups really attempting to cover Dreamcatcher songs. Maybe you'll find them here and there, but it's not really a big thing. You don't really see them on end of year things. You don't see them on a lot of mainstream variety things, which is a shame because they're amazing on variety. But just it's tough for them to ever really be in these kind of conversations, despite like how big their fandom has become. But they're really up there for me, I think.
Very on brand. Bring up Dreamcatcher. What would we be if we didn't have Koro talk about Dreamcatcher on the end of the year recap? Excellent points about Dreamcatcher. I think they are so unique. They do separate themselves from other sounds, from other groups, in the ways that you said, right? Where they can definitely cover other groups because they are a K-pop girl group, but their sound is just so different that it's very rare to find another group attempt to do their songs. I do love the rock sound. I do love the anime vibes. I think they do it the best. I think they do it the most visible. because honestly can't name any other group that could do it, or even J-pop groups that have the same type of presence, right? But with all that being said, I do hope people check them out more, because again, we do want these groups to be a little bit more successful so that they can propel into the mainstream consciousness. And yeah, if that means Koro has to nominate Dreamcatcher every week for the next year of 2022, then so be it. Koro will die on that hill, and I will be eating popcorn at the bottom of that hill. But great stuff, Koro. I really appreciate the Dreamcatcher nod. All right, let's get into some diss songs. So, boy group of the year goes to BTS. Well, let's go through one at a time. All right, so we have BTS. The candidates were BTS, TXT, and NCT. We talked a lot about all three of the groups. But really quickly, was this a surprise for you? How did you feel about BTS taking the boy group diss song?
Yeah, no surprise here, really. I mean, we already actually we didn't say much, but that's like the whole point. Like, there's really. It's BTS and everyone else, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because they're doing so much to trickle down to everyone else. So, really, if you want to have these conversations, it's them, and they're almost not even in the conversation because they're so far ahead. So maybe that means like in the future you just talk more about the other candidates because that's where the real conversation is. But yeah, there's real no surprise here. They're number one for a reason, so makes sense. And the McDonald's collab that they brought up as well, like that's in terms of mainstream, especially like Western push, like all that kind of thing. That's big. That's big because you're literally on everyone's corner. Like McDonald's just everywhere, so it makes sense.
Yeah, I do want to point out that the crew talked about BTS as a brand, right, and everything that they represent. Yes, it's K-pop. Yes, we like to think the music is what should be, everyone's starting point, and it is. But also the fact that their music is on American radio waves, is on TV and commercials here in the United States. Those are all important. Those are all really big, key, landmark things for the Korean industry. And I think even if you disagree with their music this year, even if Butter or Permission to Dance didn't hit for you, it hit for the general audience in the West, and I think that in and of itself, propels them to be boy group of the year, in my opinion. Because again, like we mentioned, it's not necessarily. It's subjective, right? So it's how best does this group represent K-pop, the Korean industry, but also visibility to this entire essentially niche market. If you're coming from the West, and that's our perspective, right? We're kids from the US, so we're American. So anytime we get to see something that we deeply care about represented in such a very mainstream way, I think is a very important thing and something that needs to be celebrated. Shout out to Doug and not taking a golden soju break underneath his desk. All right, moving on now to girl group of the year, Daesung. It goes to Twice. Let's talk a little bit more about Twice. So we did have alcohol free, mixed reviews, mixed reception, right? Ultimately, going back to the song 6 months, 8 months later, not bad. It's just there.
Thank you.
Right, like I can admit when initially I think a lot of the reaction to a song and like my personal response is affected by how other people are talking about it. So I try to disconnect as much as possible. But as soon as like one or two very strong opinions seep in, then it's like, oh, that's all I can hear. And I really have to like force myself into blinders and just like really listen to a song. And honestly, if I'm listening, because I like listen to the entire like mini albums, so I listened to the entire thing. Pretty good package.
That's a great mini album.
Well, let me ask you. So the direction of Twice right now, like they said, is going into the US and Western markets. What do you feel like? How do you feel like this is going for them? And what are your projections moving forward for Twice?
Yeah, I said a little I wrote like a little mini essay on the server about this, which is apologies to everyone who had to read that, but it's something I think about a lot, honestly. Uh, Considering the whole sphere of K-pop, and this is why it's part of why I'd also have them as a girl group of the year personally. But for the Western push thing, it's like we talked about it a little bit before. Like Blackpink is built for this. Like, and that's not to discredit anything they've done, because obviously they're taking massive steps for the industry as well. But in terms of like sound concept, having English speakers, like it's a good formula because the West is gonna be receptive to that kind of formula. And I mentioned like aespa is also built in that vein. Like it's very clearly, oh, we see Blackpink what they're doing, we can do something similar, and that's also gonna. I have no doubt that that's gonna work. And even from JYP, ITZY is way more built for the Western push, in my opinion, than Twice, because they also have an English speaker, and like the rest of them clearly have been putting in the work with English as well. And I think that's something JYP, after having Twice for a few years, was like, oh, we need to like start focusing on this early. So they're putting them in the lessons or whatever. But sound wise too, concept, that kind of thing, that's just much more accessible for the especially American audience. So I would be curious to see how they're going to push ITZY as well, because I think that makes a lot more sense. But Doug and Warren had an interesting conversation about like the level of success. Because shout out Chimboy, he also had a good point, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, because we're talking about just like there's levels to this. Twice is already successful in the West, like whether or not it's like mainstream, whether it's not the success we think of, like in like a BTS level. Obviously, no one's on that level, and they're not even on like the Blackpink level West wise, but like selling out arena tours, they have a solid fan base in the West. Like if those are the metrics, they're already doing it, and they're already big over here. But in terms of like we're talking about a different level, where like you talked about earlier, you can see people you never would have expected talking about BTS, and to a slightly lesser extent, you can see them talking about Blackpink. Like my friends easily will know who BTS or Blackpink are, but that's not the same with Twice yet, anyway. I think I am a bit skeptical about the push, because I know for a number of reasons they're not built for it. Like big groups aren't really received as well. Cute thing isn't received as well. They don't have great English levels yet, which that's also going to be a big barrier in terms of like mainstream talk shows. You can just get a translator. Obviously, it's not that big a deal, but we haven't seen them do it as much as like the others yet. There's like a lot of things in their way, but I think that's why with something like you said it before, the last couple of years they're already slightly trying that push, and you can see them changing their concept to fit, because I think even JYP knows what we've done. Like their whole like main cutesy run isn't really what they're looking for in the West. So you see them try out different things with More and More and I Can't Stop Me, but realistically, now we come back with the feels, right? They're like, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it with what we're good at. Like, it's a tough choice to make, and it's a risk. It's a big risk in my opinion, but I think there's no better way to do it, because I'll be hypocritical of saying try something different, because like when BTS started doing their English run, I was in the back of my head, I'm like, these are good songs, but I'd like to see like a Fake Love or Blood, Sweat, and Tears in English, just so we feel like the American audience is really getting a feel of what like they're capable of. I feel like showing the West the feels, you're like, this is Twice, and you're gonna have to take it or leave it, and that's what they're kind of doing here. And I'm curious to see how it works and where it goes in the future, because it's tough. It's tough, but I have faith. Either way, and I said this before, either way, like if it doesn't necessarily go as well, they have already, in my opinion, completed the K-pop main quest. Like it's if you're really talking like girl groups, it's SNSD and it's Twice, and you can talk about all these other great groups, of course, but in terms of like those two groups really did the thing to like another level. It's SNSD and it's Twice, and they've already done it. They've already had their Korean market run, which was extremely successful, and they're showing that they still have that in the bag. But this is like a massive side mission, in my opinion. This is like, oh, let's go see if we can do this thing too. And I think that's important for big companies to do, to continue to push the industry forward, like SM is doing, and obviously Hybe is doing with BTS, obviously. But yeah, I think it's a really important side mission. At the end of the day, in my opinion, it is still mostly a side mission, because even if this doesn't necessarily go well, you can't take away from Twice as they have been and what they've done as a whole. So I really rambled there, but I just really I care a lot about how well this group does. Not even well, but just like how happy they are, and I don't want them to necessarily not do well in this thing, and then for them or people in general to feel like, oh, well, Twice is falling off, whatever, like whatever that is. But yeah, I could just start rambling again, so I'm gonna stop there.
No, that was amazing. And I think it's very fitting for this discussion, right? What does it mean to be the girl group of the year in 2021? And it's like you said, there is a level of it being relative, relative to the other girl groups, of course, but then also what are the expectations that you have for Twice? Is it their journey into the West, expanding and being accessible, or is it everything that they've done to this point and how they've been able to try new things in 2020, and then coming back to the sound that is their sound, doing their thing, doing what they do well. And I think you summarized it really well in that, yes, it's relative. They are selling out. They are doing, within the fandom, within the US market, they are showing great numbers, but it's that next step of how accessible are you to just the general audience, right? And I think that is, it's a valid question, right? How is success measured if you're looking at it from the lens of, well, they're in the US, but are they really part of the US conversation? Maybe not. We don't know. But then you look at everything they've done up until this point, especially the things that they've done in 2021, and the numbers show it. They are still relevant. They are still in the consciousness of people who listen to K-pop and people in Korea. I think those two things are what's most important when you're deciding girl group of the year, right? You're looking at longevity, which it's only them in SNSD, and then you're looking at the quality of work that they've done for the year. I think those are the two things that the crew landed on. You said a lot of amazing things about Twice. I just want to give a quick shout out to Stacy girls. I love them. I would have given them girl group of the year, but I also understand that they're building up to something. They're rookies. They are, they got another corner to turn kind of thing. But I also feel like they are set up to make that push into the next era of girl groups, right? Whether that's more viral videos, whether that is more amazing music. I think they have a lot of room to grow and shine and to kind of show their skill and talent, because like the crew said, and I agree with this, I do feel like vocally they're so good that it's not something you immediately think about until you stop and realize like, oh, not only is it produced really well, but if you just take each individual member in a vacuum with talent and their ability, they are also all very good. I feel like that combination, that equation, kind of just works really well and projects really well forward for Stacy. And then we'll talk about aespa in a minute. But
also,
go ahead.
Yeah. One more thing. This is super quick. I've said enough about them already, but main thing I forgot to say in terms of like specifically girl group of the year, not just like projecting forward. Twice, with all groups in general, but with Twice, and especially with big groups, I know there's like some fatigue that tends to be with big groups, but like we're gonna talk about Twice, you're gonna compare them to every year Twice has had already, and when you're as successful as they have been, it's easy to see quote unquote down year for them and think, oh, they're not really in this conversation to the same extent. But a down year for them obviously, as is proven to be, is like an amazing year for most groups in general. So I just think they mentioned it a bit on the show. Like it's hard because you're comparing twice to twice at a certain point. I think if we just keep it relative to other groups, then yeah, they 100% have to be at least in this top 3 conversation.
I actually want to go off of that a little bit more because I have family members, family friends who have kids. One is an 8th grader. One, I think, is a sophomore in high school. They have found Twice. They're young children. They're going through the discography. They're playing the songs in my friend's house all the time to the point where now they know the songs. And going back to what you said about comparing Twice to previous Twice, I think it's always mentioned. It's often mentioned that like What Is Love and Yes or Yes and Likey are always compared to one another, right? But if you're a new fan and you're just listening to that song in a vacuum, it's kind of just good. It's kind of just amazing, right? Where when you start to look at the history of a group and start to compare, like, was this song better than that song? Was it just a retread? Was it just more of the same thing? But then you realize like, oh, well, all the songs are just consistently good and catchy. So hearing my friend's perspective of finding What Is Love for the first time and that being the song that's stuck in their head, as opposed to something like TT or Knock Knock. And it's just like, oh, yeah, that's kind of interesting that when you come into it brand new, it sticks with you. And I think that's the intention of Twice, and that's the staying power of Twice. Yeah, it's just a quick thing because that literally just happened over the holiday, hanging out with my friend, and she's like, "Yeah, they play Twice all day." Perfect. I will come over more often.
I like that.
They know the Feels dance, and so we play video games. We play Smash Brothers, and when I die, I do the Feels to distract them. Yep. Yeah, they handicap me. They give me the Switch controllers. Well, they use the nice like full controllers. So it's like, okay, yeah. I see.
Okay. Done
That's
dirty
fine.
there.
I'll just listen to Twice while we do this. All right, let's move on now to Song of the Year. Got Twice with the Feels. Okay, so we talked a lot about Twice already so far. We're gonna talk about the Winter Wonder World Cup and how it all came down. So the Feels won. Essentially through democracy, through the Discord server. They described it on the show, so we'll quickly run through it. 16 songs were put up in a bracket, in a sports elimination style bracket, and they were voted on throughout the month of December. The top 4 songs that ended the 16 song bracket were Weekly's After School, Stacy's ASAP, TXT 01 Love Song, and The Feels by Twice. Okay, my question for you: how did you feel about the Winter Wonder World Cup, this experiment, if you will, and what did you feel about the conversations that were happening throughout the entire month of December in the Winter Wonder World Cup channel?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, honestly. I want to say first off, thanks to Warren and the crew for putting it on, because it was just a great idea, great way to facilitate conversation. I think when you put things in a tournament bracket, no matter what, it automatically becomes a little more fun because it's like a little competitive, and you get a lot of people talking. I think me personally, like, I kind of viewed it as like a sports tournament, how I would a sports tournament. So like I put like stakes on it that obviously aren't there. Like I'm making it seem like it's way more grave than it actually is. But I just do that because I feel like it makes it way more engaging when you're talking with other people. And I intentionally was like trying to start conversations here and there, maybe saying spicy or hot takes, just to get people talking. 'Cause I think if it was just like dead channel, everyone voting, it just felt like kind of robotic. So I'm glad that people were really engaged with it. And with the way the tournament played out, like each day seeing these different vote totals, tracking it throughout the day, like at midnight you would see people immediately talking about the matchup. And then at the end of the day, it's like, oh, it's kind of already decided. Let's talk about the next matchup. Or let's talk about the next round. Or let's talk about what could potentially happen here or there. You have some people scheming. You have the big brain thing coming into play with people wanting their their to get that role, so they're going to vote a certain way, maybe against what they actually like. And it's like it's a lot of dynamics coming into play, making it interesting. Obviously, a lot of the top seeds ended up winning their votes, which made a lot of sense given how the structure was. I know Warren is thinking a lot about how is he going to do it in the future to make it potentially more chaotic. But I think for our first time, it was great, and it was a lot of fun, and it was good to see maybe the skeleton for something that could become a staple in the future.
Yeah, no, it's I think like you said, the chaos, something I kind of loved. To varying degrees. I think you did a nice job. You specifically did a nice job continuing the conversation throughout random parts of the day, and I think we got to commend you, Koro, for keeping up the engagement. And to me, when I read the things that you have to say, I know that there is a level of sincerity, but also a level of fun, jokiness, and like intentional clowniness. So I'm good with however you present your comments, your opinions. With all that being said, I know the internet sometimes is kind of tricky, and just reading texts of people that you don't talk to, reading tone and intonation is really difficult. So sometimes it's a challenge, but for the most part, I think we did a relatively good job of keeping things civil and keeping things fun and light, because I think it is a fun and light event, and hopefully something that can carry over into the future. Chaos, I would love it to be a randomized bracket, so then we get some randomized things. I'm not sure if that's something that Warren will do. Truly not sure. I know he talked about it, but I think it's all up in the air. I think the way that they arrived at the top 16 was interesting. Essentially, being kind enough to allow everyone to submit their top 16, over 100 songs, I think Doug mentioned. And then
I think it was over 200, maybe.
Oh my God. Was it over 200?
I feel bad. Yeah.
I think that is something that can be improved on. Not in the sense that the crew did anything wrong. I think that was just a nice way to include everyone. But again, there's a reason why representative democracy makes sense as well. Shout out to the United States. Sometimes. And then finally arriving at the top 16, and then seeing how everyone voted and scheming and playing the game, metagaming it. It's kind of fun. For me, I like to see it all happen. I don't particularly participate because I have my feelings and thoughts about songs already, and I'm just there for the fun and again, shoving popcorn in my face as it all goes down. All right, a follow-up question. So we got top 16. We got the top 4. The winner overall being Twice and The Feels, TXT 01 Love Song, runner-up, Stacey's ASAP being number 3, Koro. Of this top 16, what is your top 3?
My top 3. Okay. Well, The Feels is in there. So obviously glad that it took the dub. But the other 2. So one is Dreamcatchers because maybe no shock there. But considering my top 3 songs of the year as a whole were The Feels, Because, and Odd Eye, it's like kind of tied. I don't know which one is number 1, but those 2 are definitely my 2 favorite in the top 16. But if I had to pick a third, it was coming down to 3 songs, and 2 of them actually face each other in the first round, which was really annoying because they're kind of dead even for me, and they're so different. It's hard to compare. But After School and Advice, I love both of those a lot, and I listened to both of them a lot. So those were tough. But I ended up choosing. I didn't want to do this because, of course, it's going to come off as biased, but it's also because it's a B-side and the only B-side in the top 16. So I want to give it a shout out. I will say Last Waltz is my number 3 in the top 16 because, like, even though it isn't a title track, there's always obviously going to be a slight disadvantage there and like the type of highs it goes for in a track. It's just a really well made song. Like, it's just start to finish, it's just well written, well produced, everything about it, the subtle things in there, and it just got a lot of people excited. And I think for a B-side to be in the top 16, and not even number 16, I forget which ones were ties, but I think that was really, might have been like a specific contingent of people putting it there maybe, but I think it really says a lot about how great that song is. So I would say that's number 3.
And I also want to shout out the crew, Warren doing the twice stream, and kind of this being a positive byproduct of how they cover K-pop, because Last Waltz, again, a B-side, I don't feel like a song like that would get exposure anywhere else. If we're not talking about just this community and the way that Warren went into the album, talked about every single song. And I think that's the strength of the types of conversations Doug, Warren, and Anita have, where they go in depth, but they also give a chance to things that may not typically get visibility. Yes, Twice is a bigger group. We get it. So what? No, not everyone listens to the entire album. And I think Last Waltz is an amazing song. And hopefully it kind of spills over into other groups, other songs. And even to a lesser extent, Dreamcatcher, right? Dreamcatcher being in the top 16 is kind of amazing as well. So I echo everything you said about those two songs. Getting some shine, because I think it's nice that they get put into consideration, and that there will be a proportion of people that go back and either watch the Dreamcatcher music video or listen to Last Waltz. And I think that is only a net positive in the experience of other people to explore different K-pop. My top 3. Let's start with 3. So I'm split, but I think ultimately I'm gonna land on Promise 9 with We Go. That song just hits the disco sound perfectly, and that music video is always going to be etched in my head as far as being an art piece. Like I love the fact that it's on this screen, this MacBook, and it's being edited, and it's very current and modern with technology, with all the different scenes, but also just like resonates with the fact that I'm a kid who plays on my computer all the time and has to do creative things. But then also just seeing music video and story weaved into all of that is just, it was just such a unique experience, right? I can't recall any other music video doing something like that in the past, or someone or another group doing something like that this year, coming close to doing something like this year. My next song, no surprise, Stacey's ASAP. I love them so much. This speaks more to just how much I have attached to Stacey this year. I was already warming up to them by the end of last year, but then when ASAP came around, I was like, this is catchy. This is hitting all the notes of being a young person, but also kind of being fun with it. And then also I just like the girls musically, and the way that they sing and how they're produced and all the resources they have to do so. Very much falls in the line of what Warren usually says about music coming first and then everything else following and falling into place. And number 1, a song that I feel like got lost because it came out really early, March, is IU's Lilac. I think we said a lot about IU and her album being a celebration of her life up until this point, going from her 20s to 30s. But then, as an artist this year and everything that she accomplished, I think Lilac was a great encapsulation of all of her experiences, and being self-reflective moving forward. And for me, being a more introspective person, I attached to a lot of those themes and ideas. And the music is just great. IU always brings the polish, brings the shine with music. So that is my top 3. And it's just honestly, looking back on it, the entire year had songs that I loved, and I can't say the year was lower or lesser than years past, because I will usually cling on to a handful of songs and only listen to those songs on repeat anyways. So 2021, not so bad. Not as bad as it may seem. All right. Let's move on to the last award.
Actually, can I just sum up the entire World Cup really quickly? I just had to
go for
get this off my chest. A little smugness. I'm not actually that serious, but just saying with the feels winning the entire thing. Like, there's a lot of things I could say about the song, and obviously we did talk a lot about the song on this Soju Sessions episode. So I'm not going to say much, but I know some people might have been worried after Alcohol Free, like, oh, maybe Twice is falling off. Maybe we have to worry about them. But at the end of the day, no matter how the general discussion is about a group, because you kind of feel after alcohol free, and just in general, the last like 2 years, it was kind of going in a discussion around them, not necessarily them, but the discussion was kind of going in a weird direction, which I understood. But bangers at the end of the day speak for themselves. Like there's nothing you just can't deny when a banger comes out. So I thought it would be appropriate to sum up the World Cup and let this banger speak for itself. So I leave you with the quote: "Boy, boy, I know I got the feels. Boy, 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 I know you feel it too." And that's speaking to all the voters because we did win. So thank you guys.
In true democratic voting fashion, the acceptance speech, the winner speech, excellently executed by one Koro Sensei. And thank you for being the twice representative, sir, in the district of the SojuTalk Nation. Yeah, that was beautiful. All right, moving on now to Artist of the Year. Daesung, kind of a surprise, kind of a contentious conversation on the show. It's aespa. Let's just jump immediately to this. So Doug had some thoughts, and then Doug had a very visceral reaction to this situation. I think Doug had IU. I would have said IU as well, actually. Again, everything we said about this year being a celebration of her career. And then Anita and Warren kind of saying, excuse me, we've got a future forward group in aespa. And then Doug physically responding to it with hand, palms, foreheads, all the things, and cringing and all the things. How'd you feel about Doug's response and reaction to being outvoted by Warren and Anita?
It was hilarious because I remember when they were recording, he put like a screenshot in the Discord of his reaction, but we didn't know what he was reacting to. And it was just like, oh, curious where this is gonna come up in the podcast. I was watching very keenly to see what the big spice was gonna be. I thought this was just it was super funny because it's just like I get where they're coming from at the end of the day, but I also understand why Doug would react that way, especially given the artist that he put forward. So I thought that was a great dynamic between them. And to see Warren and Anita on the same page in this instance, it was just like, what a year. What a year. That it came down to that. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, it's... Well, first of all, shout out to Doug and just letting it all hang out. Because I wouldn't have reacted that way. I would have been like, oh, I'm sad for my favorite person. But aespa and the things that they accomplished this year, I think all amazing things, right? As far as, again, mentioning the Thanksgiving parade, that is a big step in going west, right? Going into the US market. Doing the metaverse with SM, a meme, and yet somehow we've all accepted that it's okay. And we're less memey about it now and kind of just curious, right? As I am. Musically, taking a lot of risk of being very experimental. I loved the Savage EP, but it's weird. It's not for everyone. I completely get that. But ultimately, kind of summing up what Anita was saying as far as this being a big picture type of vote, right, where they hit a lot of these different landmarks throughout the year as far as being K-pop accessible, so it's following the K-pop structure, and then being Korean audience visible and being part of every variety show regardless of demographic, and then doing the technology thing because technology is moving forward. Always in motion is technology, and them finding their niche, finding their way of exploring that with the metaverse. And then Western visibility. I mean, they did kind of hit every single landmark that a lot of different groups were focusing on individually. And I think that does make sense. Although I'd still like to repeat, if we're talking about artist and longevity and body of work, I feel like it's IU, and she's the GOAT of K-pop. Um, really quickly, I want to kind of ask you about this idea of the metaverse, right? And what that means moving forward. So they did bring up a little bit later. I think they did brought up NFTs and kind of digital currencies and digital things. Where does aespa fall into this? I mean, they were kind of like the face of it with their eye versions, but where do you sit with this idea today? Now that they are so popular and that their trajectory moving forward is only going up.
It's weird because, like, while I did find it funny, I was never really super unsure about aespa. Like, they didn't surprise me personally, so maybe that's why I wouldn't. Like, I think if you really doubted them, then them popping off like this is gonna feel even crazier because you had such low expectations. But for me, like, although Black Mamba, I have my problems with it. I was like, this is SM, new girl group. They're gonna pop off to at least a certain extent. Obviously, I didn't see like the level it got to, but so quickly at least. I thought they'd get there eventually, but this was like very meteoric in the sense. But in terms of why I bring up their beginnings is because it seemed like this meta. I'm not too knowledgeable on like metaverse, that kind of thing, but it seemed like, at least with like the eyes and their virtual versions of them, it seemed like that was going to be really pushed early on. And I think maybe that's where a lot of the hesitation came from. And I understand that too. I was probably there too with people, but it seemed like SM kind of just like put that in the back seat for now. Like, it's always there, it's always present. And I think they're letting us know it's future as well. It's present and it's future. Because I think they're going to, maybe now that they built that foundation musically, they're gonna now maybe do something with it more. But it hasn't really been like front and center, I don't think. And they had that one, I don't know if you saw it, but they had this one like SM Cultural Universe video, episode 1, where it's like a full on just like beginning of a
It was a short
series.
movie. It was kind of amazing.
Yeah, sure, yeah. I was like, oh, I don't really care too much about the lore, but this is interesting. Like, if they put out something in this format, I can watch this, and I'm not like feel like it's getting shoved down my throat in the lyrics, like Kwangya this, Kwangya that, novice, whatever. So I'm curious where it goes from here because it hasn't been pushed too much yet. Because there was only one episode that dropped, so maybe I felt like they're like, all right, let's just have this ever present, but focus on the music, focus on our push. And now that they kind of have us all in this trap, SM's gonna be like, okay, now we roll this out full force. Like, this is where we're going, 2022. It feels like the rest of the world kind of caught up with them. Maybe they were just like a couple months too early with that. So we'll see. I'm not sure, but it is interesting to follow.
Yeah, it seems like they are going in a lot of different directions, but also balancing it well, where it feels like they are giving it the right amount of attention. Each thing, right? Whether that's experimenting with music, whether that's experimenting with the metaverse, whether that's doing the short film side content that expands on everything put together, right? I think a lot of that has to do with having resources. So shout out to you, SM, for making money and doing your thing. I got a quick follow up. I got a quick thing for you. So we watched Warren on Twitch stream talk about his favorite songs of the year. And I think there was a question in chat. Is SM the label of the year for 2021? Koro, what are your thoughts?
I would say yes. I would say yes. I know the discussion is like two-horse race, Hybe or SM. Because if we're talking resources, that's them and everyone else once again. So it's like, you'd hope at least. And I think I said this too. Like, I'd hope it'd be Hybe or SM with the amount of resources you have and the level that your groups are at because of those resources. That you could be label of the year. Because if you're not, then it's like, what are you doing with all these resources? But I think they put it all to good use this year. Not only are they pushing the industry forward, like, they're taking risks that, it's only really them taking it to an extent, but it's only them that maybe could take it. Like, Hive, maybe you could say JYP or YG, but I don't even think JYP or YG are on that level in terms of sheer amount of resources and size that could go for something at this level. And that's not to discredit them, because it would have been very easy for them to just sit on it, like, oh, we're huge, we have all these big artists, we can just continue doing what we're doing and we'll make a lot of money and it won't matter. But they're like, especially Lee Suman, or Isuman, I don't pronounce it, but it seems like he's definitely he seems very forward thinking in what he wants to do with this company, even if it seems like he's stepping down or something. I forget what's happening with that, but there's definitely a forward direction here. And even without all of that, just music wise, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of every individual song. Like, you have your stickers, Troll of the Year. You have your, I have my whole sticker headcanon, but you have your stickers, you have your Next Levels, which has like a song of the year in it, but most of it I'm not a big fan of. You have your other stuff, but NCT and aespa are doing big things, and they're experimenting, and that's like the future of SM. But even talk about soloists, you have Taeyeon with Bambi, amazing song. You have Kai, who came back recently. You have Taeyeon, you have Key, you have Shiny, who came back with a bang. I think Super Junior might have released something early in the year. You have Taeyeon obviously doing her thing, Hyoyeon doing her thing. I better was like December, but that was still amazing. And you have EXO, you have Red Velvet, two groups that kind of been, you don't know what's going on, because obviously the Wendy thing and then the military. They came back with two, sure, easy listening songs, maybe safe songs, people may say, but they're great songs and solid EPs. And I think SM, just like in terms of hitting every single note you need to hit, they did it, because they have their experimental stuff, they have their future, they have their tech. They also have, we're just gonna release solid music with artists people already love, like your EXOs, Red Velvets, your Shiny members, your everything else, Taeyeon. So I think just like they're just doing it all, and maybe, sure, you could say they're one of few companies that could do it all, but they're doing it all, and I think you got to give them the credit for 2021.
To add to that, amazing, by the way. Thank you for so many layers of thoughts about SM. It's the variety of music for me. It's yes, experimental, but also you have extremely general audience accessible songs in the weekend by Taeyeon, and then you have all the weirdo stuff with aespa and Savage and NCT. So I think the variety speaks volumes to how they're able to do so many different types of music and experiment. And then, like you said, the resources. You know, a lot of companies, it's not a lot, but there are companies who have resources that aren't doing this, which again, I think speaks to the fact that SM is doing all this in service of K-pop. So they are making money, but now they are feeding it back into the creative process and trying different things. I think that speaks volumes to why I agree that SM is the label of the year. Quick shout out to something in the future. We've got a girl group. It's called Girls on Top. That's all I'll say. I watched the music video. I love every single member of this group, and yeah, it's a lot to process. I might need all of 2022 to process it, because there's this fire everywhere. Okay, man. All right, let's move on to some predictions. Let's move on to the cruise discussion. So they did recap their 2021 predictions, as well as give new predictions for 2022. There's a lot to go through. So what we're gonna do is, Koro, I'm gonna throw it to you, and I want you to pick maybe 2 or 3 of your favorites between Doug, Warren, and Anita, and then I'll throw in a couple, and then we'll move on to the new predictions for the upcoming year.
Okay. So old predictions. Some of my favorites. Although Doug didn't give himself enough credit for this, in-person concerts in the fall. I know we're talking K-pop specifically, so it's like only BTS. But I know, well, Twice did have theirs as well. In Korea, but I guess that's winter, but just in general, in music in general, we saw a lot of concerts in the fall. A lot of concerts, maybe some prematurely, we don't know, but we did see a lot. And obviously, there's things that happened there. So I think that was actually pretty accurate. Um, and I'll pick one from Anita. Anita, she said Weekly and aespa Pop Off was very different comebacks. And they did have extremely different comebacks, which I guess it's not like a super hot take because they are different, had different directions, but aespa obviously popped off to the next level. But Weekly, I think After School did pop off to a certain extent, and they talked about this on the show. But yeah, Holiday Party, it is what it is. It feels like a bit of a slight misstep. I don't know, maybe not. A lot of people like it, but it doesn't feel like it has the same excitement around it. I would say that it doesn't have the same excitement around it as their previous stuff. But I still do think that's pretty accurate, and I don't think people. I think it's only going to take one song again for people to get back on the Weekly train to the same extent. I don't think they're like fully. People are done with them like that. And then Warren talked about hyperpop in the mainstream. Anita also mentioned it, but it's coming. It's starting and it's happening. And I just could say because aespa is the front of it in K-pop, and they are so successful, maybe that's just 100% right. Like it is mainstream to that extent, but I think in the way that he meant it, I can't speak for him obviously, but in the way that he meant it is like more like a trend, like more groups doing it. I think we're going to get that in 2022 to varying levels of quality, which is why I'm worried, because not everyone can polish it the way SM does it. But it's definitely coming, I think.
Yes. To kind of build off of the hyperpop on mainstream, I think we started. I still don't feel like the majority of people know what hyperpop is or can differentiate. Because speaking personally, sometimes I feel like I figured it out. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about anything.
I also don't know, by the way.
Right. The only thing right now I can think of as a hyperpop that's not aespa is Billy. The only other group or song that I can distinctly say that's pretty experimental, that's pretty weird, I think that's hyperpop. Some of the other predictions that I liked from them last year that they kind of went back on and thought about some stuff. Well, let me talk. Well, okay, let me do the positive one first. So we have Blackpink solos, Rose and Lisa. However you feel about the songs themselves, they pulled it off. They had the two releases at two different times of the year where they got the most exposure. And honestly, being a big Rose fan, I got everything I wanted. I'm good. The other one, not so good. I got ITZY, Girl Group of the Year. I will just chalk this up to JYP trying a lot of different things this year and hoping that one of the experiments were going to pop off. Between Alcohol Free and Mafia in the Morning, I don't think either of them were the jumping off point. So he pulled it back, or collectively the creative team pulled it back and did something similar with both. And it looks like Twice was more successful at doing something more familiar. Loco, I loved Loco. I love the album, a lot of tracks on that album. But I don't think it still had the same success or popularity as Twice. So, hopefully next year we get some ITZY. We get something moving forward with ITZY. Because I would love to see them not get lost in the sauce between Twice and the new girl group. From Anita, English tracks, so many English tracks, which I'm fine with because, again, I think the US market and people being exposed to K-pop and Asian entertainers in general is always a good thing. Those are our look back recap into the 2021 predictions. Let's move on now to our favorites of the new predictions 2022. We've got a lot of stuff that Doug, Warren, and Nina went through. We'll do it the same. Koro, what are your 2 or 3 favorite predictions that they made moving forward into 2022?
Ooh, okay. The new ones. This one was interesting because it felt like, especially felt like Doug was like, bang, bang, bang. I'm just gonna hit him with the hot takes, maybe. I assume I can guess which one you might talk about. So let's for Doug, let's say JYP girl group more music show wins than ITZY. That's interesting. That's very interesting. But I don't necessarily disagree because ITZY, when they first released Dollar Dollar, they popped off unexpectedly with the amount of music show wins that had. Maybe it's timing, who knows, but it was a great song as well, so you can't really discredit it. But this new girl group, I haven't been following all like the pre-debut stuff super closely. I don't like putting that much time in if the if the music isn't gonna end up being good. I don't know, but it seems like this group JYP is really investing in, at least from the little things I've seen. I hope that doesn't mean ITZY's like a in between type of group because it feels like they have that kind of cycle. But it's gonna be 7 members, I believe. It seems like they're gonna have also maybe a girl crush thing. I can't really tell, but if there's too much overlap there, and then this is like the new shiny thing on the block, I can see this popping off more than ITZY in the calendar year at least. But we'll see because I don't know. I feel like people also want ITZY to do well. Not that they're not doing well; they're obviously selling a lot, but musically, they want them to come back with a bang. So it's gonna be interesting. But music show wins that really has nothing to do with anything we say. I mean, that's all the shows and stuff. So really, I have no idea, but I could see that happening. Nita, she also talked about new JYP group Rookie of the Year, which I think is likely unless like the YG group comes out or something. So let's talk about Metaverse. Let's talk about TikTok. Okay, let's talk about TikTok. I don't know if this is necessarily a hot take or anything, but not that she was trying to make hot takes, but I think this is spot on because it's proven. I don't know if you saw that article also the other week. Apparently TikTok is like #1 like used internet thing over Google, I think. I think something about that came out recently. Obviously there's a lot of things that may factor into that, but it's clear there's a lot of people on there, and especially in the K-pop target demographic, there's such an overlap there that it just makes a lot of sense. And seeing people do it successfully over the last couple years and the pop-ups that can happen with that, it just makes sense. So I think TikTok is gonna double down on in the future. And I hope that doesn't mean less horizontal movement like we know they talk about with Somi a lot, but I think that's 100% going to happen. So that makes a lot of sense. And then Warren talked about a big push from JYP. That one, I chose that one because it's kind of already a lot of things we talked about. There's a lot of overlap there, but especially on the boy group side is interesting because Stray Kids feels kind of like they're just doing their own thing. And it's just, especially because they can self-produce as well. It feels like no matter what, Stray Kids is going to be fine, and they're already huge. So it's like you feel like you don't really take them into account as much. The Extraordinary Heroes, I don't know how to pronounce that, but Extraordinary Heroes, I don't know what's going to happen with them, but new band, and then you see all the Day 6 stuff happening. So there's definitely like a slight changing of the guard happening there. But it also, now with No Got 7, and then you got the Loud group, I think, coming from that show with Psy. It's going to be interesting how the boy group thing moves forward because it feels like it's kind of in flux outside of Stray Kids. But yeah, with the new girl group, ITZY, Twice, we kind of already talked about a lot of it, but it's going to be interesting how they balance those three. I don't think Twice is really in the equation because they're going for the West. It doesn't feel like they're competing for the same, not that they have to compete, but in terms of like resources, it doesn't feel like they're all going for the Korean market in the same way. Like Twice is obviously pushing a lot more westward. It's really going to come down to the thing we talked about with ITZY and the new group, how that gets balanced. But I think Twice, at the end of the day, it is year 7, actually. I forgot about that. And that's like the big thing of the year. Even more than anything else I've said, it's going to be, everyone's going to have their eyes out. What's going to happen? It's year 7. But I do think either way, they're going to have a great year. And I think it would be weird if they started pushing westward the year before year 7 just for them to end it. Obviously, it's going to come down to the members. But I do have some faith that we're going to continue. So it's going to be interesting to see how they balance all of that.
Yeah, it's just JYP. I do feel like is in a spot, right, where they've been consistent throughout the past 3 or 4 years. They've had pop-offs. They've had middle times. I'll say middle times, not necessarily low times. But there's just a lot of uncertainty moving forward. Between Twice making the push into the US, like we mentioned, the new girl group. I have not followed anything because I still love ITZY, so that's where my allegiance stands. I'm going to ride or die with ITZY. Shout out to Hwang Yeji, Night Fury, Light Fury. And then also ITZY, just like the question that they're kind of in between these two groups, right? I think the crew mentioned FX at one point throughout the year. Hopefully they don't turn into the FX of JYP, but man, I need ITZY to be popular, please, someone.
Yes.
Going off their new predictions, some of my favorites from them. I won't go into too much detail on this one. I'll just say, Stacey Girls, it's going down, please. The one from Doug that really stood out to me was an older group becomes the Brave Girls of 2022. I think that's incredibly fascinating. I think that, again, will be a reflection not just on music, but on the internet culture and technology, and what that means for a person on the internet who's doing something for free, essentially, creating this buzz and then ultimately blowing up into something that is industry defining. I think something like that, I honestly could never have thought, like, as a young person on the internet, would have some type of impact, right? I can't say who, because I don't know enough of the new groups, the groups that have gotten forgotten over the years, for a good reason. But again, if something does pop off, that I go back and listen to 10 years worth of their songs, and these members, whether they're boys or girls, are in their 30s and they're super successful, I think that's amazing. So shout out to all the people who are still holding on to their dreams, trying to work in entertainment. For Anita, the metaverse. And I think this ties into Warren as well. So let me just group these two together. So the metaverse continues to grow. I grew up at a time when the graphics of these verses was not that great. So World of Warcraft is kind of the initial, like, my foundation of like what these universes are, like these worlds are, right? But there was something called Second Life back in the late 2000s, and then into the 2010s, that essentially was this, where you got to live out a persona, an avatar, but then it was open source, so it was free to everyone, but it eventually grew into this space that had its own economy, that had its own ability to interact with other people, individuals. But I'm not sure if that ever caught on financially to the rest of the world, right? I think it was still fairly niche, but it did set the foundation for a lot of what we're seeing now between the metaverse, and then even between what Facebook Meta is ultimately trying to do. In addition to their VR, they are trying to make a place where it is a second life, like what Second Life was attempting to accomplish. And then NFTs, crypto. I know there's a lot said about NFTs and crypto and just, being uncertain. All I will say is, if you give it a chance, and kind of really understand what cryptocurrency, not just Bitcoin, but all the other cryptocurrencies are trying to accomplish as far as being a digital democratized asset governed by math, makes a lot of sense. That's all I'll say. I'm not a crypto bro. Not at all. I have no money in crypto. But the theory behind it is incredibly interesting. The only thing that freaks me out is the fact that it is so decentralized, and certain coins are just so unknown that I'm very fearful of putting money into something that is just has no backing. Right. Whereas like Bitcoin or Ethereum, they do have a history. So people are putting money into it. So there's a little bit of social understanding that is worth something. But the other ones, it's still a little too high level for me to completely understand and wrap my head around. But again, that kind of falls back into K-pop, where it does make sense that NFTs can be a digital asset tied into a physical asset. So some NFTs are doing that, where you buy this NFT, you can also get the physical version. And I think that is something that could be explored with photo cards. Yeah. A quick 2 cents there. Bro, we went super long. We hit everything. We're gonna quickly wrap it up. We got 2022. We're here. We're now. What is one personal hope you have for the upcoming year? It can be K-pop. It can be in your life. It can be anything. What are you hoping for this year?
This year, okay. I guess one personal is graduate from college successfully. Hopefully that goes well. I'm not too worried, but I also it's just on the horizon, so the future's on the mind. But K-pop wise, Twice concert in February, 2 New York dates. I got tickets for neither, but I'm still. I hope that goes well for them. I'm also, even if I could get a ticket, I'm still skeptical because of how hard the Decepticon variant is popping off. So I am a little wary there, but I hope things go smoothly. I hope people have a good time. Maybe I could sneak a little ticket at some point. I just wish the best for them. Those are my those are my 2 hopes.
I too did not get tickets to the Oakland Coliseum show or the LA show. That was a whole experience. We all experienced it together on Discord, and I Twitch streamed some of my Descent into Madness. But as far as a hope, I do hope that the Omicron, the Decepticon, the Megatron of it all calms down. Please, everyone get vaccinated. Everyone do your part. Whatever that means. If you're not vaccinated, fine. Stay indoors. Don't leave your house. That will most likely keep you from getting this disease and dying. Otherwise, yes, everyone stay safe. Kind of contrary to this idea of staying home, I do hope in 2022, once the virus settles down, once people are no longer getting sick, that the world opens up more fully, meaning more concerts. Hopefully the concerts that have been scheduled aren't canceled. Conventions. So I know Doug mentioned KCON, but also anime conventions, comic book conventions, video game conventions. I'd like to have those back, because it is kind of nice to see people in real life, talking to people away from the keyboard. And that goes from anime and comic books to seeing people in real life talk about K-pop, which is something I sorely miss. I went to one cup sleep event a few months ago when things were pretty light, and it was kind of this revelation of seeing people enjoy and celebrate K-pop. It was Joy's birthday, and Red Velvet was playing very loudly for hours, and I didn't want to leave, but there was only so much I could do at a boba shop with a pop-up stand outside. So it was an amazing time. Again, this is my hope for 2022, that we open up and we get to see each other in real life again. Koro, thank you so much for joining on this ride. This is a good time, man.
It was a lot of fun. Sorry to everyone listening. I do ramble a lot. I apologize, but I just have a lot of thoughts about these things that I don't even know I have until I start talking. And to end off with another ramble, listen to Niji U, because now we're officially done talking K-pop. I know it's technically not K-pop. It's another JYP group that they have to balance, but Take a Picture, another sleeper song of the year. Choreo is amazing. Check it out. I just have to drop that recommendation there. If you know, you know. They're great. But yeah, thanks for having me, man. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Anytime. You are definitely a go-to for things like this. And 2022, we'll do some more. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the SojuTalk Nation podcast, episode 41. Subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify or your preferred podcast platform, and continue the conversation on the SojuTalk Kpop Podcast Discord. This has been the SojuTalk Nation for Koro. This is Crispy. Bye.
They 100% get people talking. And it's even like how many artists they have under them, you don't even think about. So when you think label of the year, I really had to go back and think, like you said, like, oh, wow, I forgot they have Shiny. Oh, they have the EXO members doing solo stuff. They have the SNSD members who are still there doing solo stuff. Like, just things here and there where it's like, wow, they have so much.
Yeah. Same. It's one of those where you look up, like a new artist will like pop up, or like a new song or music video will pop up, and then be like, oh, this is pretty good. And you look up, it's like, oh, SM Town.
Yeah.